This is Andrew Schwab from Project 86, and you're listening to Discography Discussion.
Good evening, sir.
Hey, guys.
How's it going?
We got a whole crew here.
Yeah, we're
the triplets.
How we doing?
Yeah, sometimes we can't get people to talk to us, so we have to bring our own dudes.
Got to fill the dead space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are you guys located?
In St. Louis.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
Likewise, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. If you come to St. Louis, just watch your van. People like to steal equipment here.
He's aware. He's been to St. Louis a few times.
That's what we're known for, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And if your heroes are alive and well, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play. We are on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We are on TuneIn Radio. So if you have an Amazon Echo product, you can say to it, Alexa, play the latest episode of Discography Discussion, and she will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out, and it lets us know you're listening. Our guest this week is Andrew Schwab from Project 86.
Right on. Well, you got a whole studio set up here, huh?
Yeah, we used to record music in it, but it has been translated into what you see now.
Podcasting's a real industry. Music is not.
Yeah, we realized that, I guess, about 10 years ago? Something like that.
Well, I was in denial for about 5 of it.
I wish I was joking.
No, I hear you, for sure. I guess we should introduce ourselves, because he's like, I'm trying to be cool to these total strangers here. I'm Dan. I'm the guy that's been emailing you all week.
Okay.
And,
good to meet you, man.
I'm Geoff.
Hey, Geoff.
How's it going?
I'm Joe down in front.
Joe, how you doing? Are you pushing the buttons?
I'm pushing all the buttons, turning all the dials, and making everybody look and sound as pretty as possible.
Got it.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Then I feel like I've done my job.
This is a podcast, right?
Yes, sir. You're not live somewhere.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, pants aren't mandatory, so we're good.
Yeah, you have no idea what's going on under this line.
Absolutely. Yeah, we
all right, let's take bets. $20.
Right.
No.
So this doesn't get awkward. Anytime I've ever referred to you in the past, I've always just referred to you as Schwab. Do you want to be called Schwab or just Andrew?
A lot of people call me that. It's funny because that would imply that I know that person because it's more of a nickname, but that is so common in Project 86dom.
Right.
For people to call me that. Yeah, sure, man. Whatever.
It's up to you, man. It's not a big thing. We
Sir Schwab. How about that?
Sir Schwab. Schwab the Great and Powerful.
I have been toying with the idea of introducing you on the show to the theme of the 2001 Space Odyssey. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Schwab.
Right.
Do it. That sounds awesome.
So yeah, we've been big Project 86 fans forever, except maybe this guy. But
Uh-oh.
You're a hater?
No, I'm not a hater. I spend most of my time listening to metal from Europe.
Yeah.
That's cool. Feel you on that.
But yeah, me and Joe, on the other hand, have been I guess on the bandwagon since what, Joe? 2000, I guess.
In 2000, a certain lead singer who happens to be my brother played a song for me that was called One Armed Man, Play On.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, it was one of those, we had a very short list of people that we wanted to talk to, and you were kind enough to respond to us.
Yeah, man, no problem. And thanks for the support and the love, guys.
Yeah, for sure, man. We,
awesome.
Yeah, big fans. So,
hey, man.
So, what made you want to talk about the Mars Volta?
Oh, I was going through my iTunes and I was like, okay, these guys want rock. And rock music is over, right?
For sure, yeah.
For now.
It's I wish I was joking about that one too. So I'm just like, who do I want to talk about? Who would be fun to talk about? Who do I know enough about that I would be passionate enough to have opinions on to fill, a podcast? And so I was going through, and I made it all the way to M before I found anything I wanted to talk about. And I was like, oh, the Mars Volta.
There you go.
Perfect. They're also broken up, so that's even better.
Right.
Well, see, I was joking with him that you were going to pick something like Nine Inch Nails or Marilyn Manson.
That's too obvious, though.
But that was too obvious, so I made that foolish decision to be like, he's going to pick one of those, and I got to go stock up, and then it was Mars Volta. Yes!
No, I mean, I was truthfully going to pick Lana Del Rey, but you guys don't want to talk about Lana Del Rey.
It would. I don't know how different my day would have been necessarily. I listened to all of the Mars Volta albums today because I only had, I think, the first 3.
Okay.
And so I'd kind of, but I was actually really surprised when I got to the end that it had stayed consistent throughout. That was kind of a surprise for me because I guess over time I just started moving more towards heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier stuff, and it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. Yeah,
I picked them because not because I'm passionate about their entire catalog. Truthfully, I'm not super familiar with some of their mid-catalog stuff, but the stuff that I am passionate about, I'm really passionate about, and I have a lot of opinions and thoughts and interesting, stories, but Deloused is one of my favorite records of the last 15 years. Deloused in the Comatorium. And so I could talk about that record for quite a while. I just picked them because they're an interesting band. They get it in terms of the role of perception and mystique in rock and roll, and I think a lot of bands don't give much credence to that anymore. Even though they're a band that's broken up, I think for even the time that they came out, they sort of went about their perception of their art in a way that I relate to, in a way that I would always want to choose to not necessarily emulate, but that's the category of art that I relate to a lot. And just there was so much just richness to all of their albums. So creative, so musically speaking, all over the map. But they were always trying to challenge themselves to do something, that was more wacky than the previous stuff. And when they were really on. But there was a lot of moments throughout those records, especially those middle records, where they were off insofar as they were just being so weird that it just wasn't listenable.
It didn't connect, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm giving you sort of the grand overview of why I picked them, though, mainly because the first 2 records really, really were important to me, and then some songs after that are still in rotation for me every now and then.
Definitely feel you on that first one because the first record, so I was a huge At the Drive-In fan,
as was I
beforehand. And I liked, obviously, I like Sparta too, and just that kind of sound. While not necessarily being super unique in those bands, I mean, and that they were kind of the most unique as far as like what actually got out there. They made it all the way to St. Louis, and
right.
So the first one I heard after At the Drive-In split, basically was I heard Sparta first, which that essentially sounded like At the Drive-In, and the Mars Volta, I don't think I was completely ready for it. Like when I put in Deloused for the first time, I kind of didn't know what to expect. I knew Cedric was singing for him, and I loved his voice and all that. And I was completely floored at the absolute extremes that they went to separate themselves from pretty much everything that they had done as musicians before that. Especially like just hearing Cedric's voice go so above and beyond. Because I'm predominantly a singer, so I really focus in on the vocal side of it, and he just, I mean, I couldn't like when all my friends were toting stuff like like Coheed and Cambria for like how, crazy and, crazy his voice sounded and stuff. I was like, I don't know, man, you really need to listen to this Mars Volta band because this guy is just insane.
Well, I remember you played this for me first because I think they had a new album out, and I don't remember which record it was, but the story that I got out of you was this record has Flea playing bass on all the songs. The band improvises all their live shows, and their newest record they had recorded essentially live and it might have been Francis the Mute. They had recorded it live and improvised it, and so every time you go see them, it was different. And I thought, well, that can either be really, really interesting or really, really dumb.
I think it would depend on how well the bandmates gel. When you get something like that, I think they've done. I think they proved that they gel because it's been pretty impressive. Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see the Red Hot Chili Peppers connection. I didn't realize that at first. I know John Frusciante actually toured with them for a little bit in support. And played shows with them on stage. Not as an opener, but actually on stage with them. But yeah, that the first album. I mean, it was hook, line, and sinker for me, man. It's his voice. I mean, the arrangements are really, really cool too. I mean, you can really tell that somebody put a lot of thought into it. It's not just your run of the mill, with a crazy vocalist behind it. There's it's something you can listen to over and over again, and you're going to find little nuances that you probably missed the previous listen. And I really like that with music in general. I mean, I kind of sound like a broken record on some of these podcasts, but that's I got to be able to listen to cover and enjoy it all the way through. And you want to talk about a rookie effort, man. It's one of the, like you said, it's probably one of the best albums of the last 15 years. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, the thing about Deloused, and there's so many, again, layers to talk about with that particular record. I think it is a pretty timeless album because I think if it were to drop today, it would still be just as cool from a production standpoint. It'd be just as interesting to listen to. There's so much to absorb from part to part and moment to moment. And yeah, the dynamics are incredible. I want to talk about just like the production side of it.
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Because Rick Rubin was the producer, and Omar and Cedric are, especially Omar, these sort of creative types that are, like, it was probably difficult to make that record because they are the type of guys that want to produce themselves and don't want anyone else to be speaking into the process. And if you've ever listened to anything that Rick Rubin has put his hands on, it's always pretty simple. Like the way that he approaches, songs and song structures and sounds, everything is very in your face as far as the production. There's not as much nuance to it as there is. It's just like Rick Rubin knows how to make great records that a lot of people connect with, and he's proven it over decades. And if you listen to Deloused and then compare that to Francis the Mute, it almost seems like the band was so frustrated by being reined in by Rick Rubin that they just went the complete opposite direction, because there's no real songs besides The Widow on that second album. It's all like
noise,
movements, and it's supposed to be one piece, and it's like tracks are 12 minutes long with 8 minutes of interlude and sounds and things like that. The thing that makes Deloused listenable is that they're all standalone good songs with good choruses and good verses, and they're all structured in the same way. It's verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, or some version of that formula, which there's a reason why producers try to rein you into that formula, because the listener can relate to it and follow it. And so, for after Deloused, I feel like when they decided they wanted to write just a song that had a really good chorus, they did it really well. But they would only do it once a record or once every other record later on. But if you listen to tracks like Teflon, which is, on one of their last releases, that's a really straightforward like rock song with a really great chorus. But they only chose to do it once on that album, you know?
Right, yeah.
The Widow is the song on the second album on Francis the Mute, you know, which also has a lot of great moments, but it's not as coherent as Delouse. So, you know, I really feel like Rick Rubin had a lot to do with why people loved that first album. I really do.
Yeah.
It's a little confusing to me because the big names that come to mind for me when I think of what a Rick Rubin produced record sounds like, most recent example, unfortunately, is Metallica. Then there's System of a Down, there was Johnny Cash, the American recordings, and then all the hip-hop he did in the late 80s and early 90s.
Hey, you forgot to mention Slayer.
I did not forget Slayer. I was getting there. Thank you, sir. They're all very flat. It's all turn it up to 9 or 10, and just that's where the dynamic sits. But then this record, there's dynamics all over the place. There's layers, and I wonder, did they just give him so much sound that he couldn't put a clench on it? Because isn't he notorious for you mentioned reeling it in? Isn't he notorious for saying take it back to basics and just stick to that? Because there's a lot going on Deloused.
I've never worked with him. I think just from talking to people who have worked with him, like he is really zen and kind of just wants the artist to do their thing and to feel comfortable. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, he's about songs because that's what you have to be about if you're going to make big rock records that sell. I think that songwriting is what makes it so dynamic, and I just think that he ran with what, you know, they were rolling with there. I would have been really curious to hear some of these songs before they got trimmed, you know, because I guarantee every one of them was probably twice as long and had 8 more parts going on. And, you know, if he was doing his job, what he did was he said, okay, let's pick these 4 parts or these however many parts. These are the best parts, and let's assemble these, and that will be the song.
Right.
The thing now, from a lyric/thematic standpoint, I want to get my hands on this because I've never seen it, but they released a limited edition, like, graphic novel that went along with the album. That sort of, you know, captured, you know, the story that was supposed to be told. Are you guys familiar with kind of the story of that album?
The most that I've picked up is that it is about the suicide of an artist. And I could be completely off base on that, but I probably read that in a press release, like when the album came out. So, and as much as I think I like to know lyrics, I found the lyrics to be a little incomprehensible.
Oh, of course.
You know, not as much on this album, but oh my God, on the next ones, like, it got out of control. But yeah, as far as I know, it's like supposed to be the suicide of an artist who was like friends with Cedric, unless I'm thinking of the wrong record, but I know it's supposed to be like a journey, like, I don't know, like right before the moments of death. Am I wrong about that? Well, it sounds like you know.
This was the gist of it, from what I remember. Yeah, they had a friend who was, you know, I guess, close with the band, and I think he was a drug addict, but they wanted to write this record sort of in memory of him, and so the character, quote unquote, that the album's about, his name is Serpentaxed, and most of the album is about a drug-induced coma and visions that he sees while he's in this coma. And then at the end of the album, he has a choice as to whether or not he wants to live or die. And, you know, he chooses death over life because of, you know, the ugly state of the world and humanity, basically. And, you know, as he's passing on, he and they, the band, and this is on track 9 of the album, he sort of tries to usher a curse onto the city in which he lived. There's some really haunting, scary lyrics in that song. This is my favorite song on the record. I forget the name of the song. It's track 9. It's called, I should pull up the...
Televators?
Televators.
Televators, yeah. I love that song. It's the acoustic song in the album. There's more to it than that, but it's pretty interesting because all the tripped out lyrics are supposed to be visions that he's seeing in this drug-induced coma.
Yeah, I think he purposely OD'd, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then went into a coma, came out of the coma, and then I don't know how long afterwards, but then he committed suicide.
Yeah.
Because he just, and that's what happened to the individual, and I guess that's how why they wrote the album the way they did, with the lyrics the way they did, is because they literally wanted to reflect it. I think didn't they have his diary or two or something like that they were able to read from and write some stuff from, or is that a different album?
That was the next album.
Next
we can
album. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
A little bit here. This is worth.
I'm combining them.
Here, Delouse and the Comatorium's Mars Volta's first studio album. Hour-long tragedy takes us through the tale of a man named Serpentax as he attempts to kill himself by ingesting morphine and rat poison. The attempt fails, and he falls into a coma for the next 7 days, in which he travels through the dream world of the Comatorium. At the end of the 7 days, he arises only to find that the world is unsatisfactory, and he, for the last time, takes his own life by jumping off a bridge. The story is based upon a friend of Cedric Bixler, Zavala, Julio Venegas. The event greatly impacted the lives of both Omar Rodriguez Lopez and Cedric, and greatly influenced their music.
Yeah, I know he jumped off the bridge like during traffic or something like that, like during rush hour.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was track 9 as well.
Is that your standout song, Andrew?
I mean, that and track, I think it's track 3.
The Widow.
No.
Oh, wait, that's
Dares.
Francis. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, Roulette Dares.
Roulette Dares.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Those will be my 2 favorite tracks on that album. I don't know. I just felt like it was a perfect storm in the best possible way, in terms of the way that they launched their band. You know, they did their very first album with Rick Rubin. I felt like they tapped into something that both At the Drive-In and Sparta failed to tap into. Both of those bands were kind of like post-hardcore almost.
They were, yeah, for sure.
I thought Relationship of Command was, the best moment for At the Drive-In. Obviously, it was their best-selling album. They were kind of, a larger-than-life rock band rather than like a punk rock scene kind of thing.
Right. They weren't really there to usher in a new style of music as much as they just wanted to actually prove their chops and actually pushing rock forward.
Just do their own thing.
Which they did. Unfortunately, nobody really followed after.
Yeah, they're not an easy act to follow. I mean, they're very unique. So I think that's the reason why we're doing it, though, is because you can't really put them in a, the so-called, generic niche. I think they're so all over the place that, you can't really categorize them. The more you get like that with a band with me, the more I tend to enjoy their music. And I also like the fact that they challenge the listener, sometimes maybe a little too much in the middle albums, but I do like the fact that they make you think, and they make you become, have a critical ear, and makes you want to go and re-listen. It's just not so. It's not the generic, straightforward crap that you hear most of the time. This is what rock music should be. You can tell right from the get-go which band it is, and I wish there was more bands that were like that. That as soon as they start playing, immediately who you're listening to, and that's what I get when I listen to, especially on this one, and then the 2 latest releases. I think those are probably my 3 favorite, but I think there's a reason behind that. Is because I think they challenge it, but they don't put it so far out into left field that you're completely overwhelmed.
So are you guys familiar with the artist who worked on not only this one, but some of the band's other records as well?
I know that there was the same artist that was doing quite a bit of the art, but I didn't look into the actual artist. I normally do that stuff, but this time around I did not.
So his name's Storm Thorgerson, and he did a lot of the really famous Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, a lot of other people as well, Peter Gabriel. He's one of the most renowned best layout artists, in rock music history, basically. But he did like the Dark Side of the Moon cover. He did the Muse Absolution cover. He's done some of the most recognizable albums. You probably don't even know that he did them.
Now that you say
Right, we
that,
know
I'm
the
looking
album
at the
covers,
cover
but
and
yeah,
I'm thinking, wow, that does look like Dark Side of the Moon. Just the style.
They've got it. Yeah, I always noticed that they definitely had a theme, with a lot of their cover artwork and layouts and things. That doesn't surprise me at all that that he probably has done so many album covers that I just haven't even.
Oh, he did Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin.
Oh, okay.
Which is that scary image of that like rock mountain with those naked children crawling up it.
Yeah, it's got a very like Cthulhu type of it's creepy.
Yeah, he's done so many cool things. At any rate, the fact that they had him do their cover art, totally made sense because of the bands that they were that they were kind of influenced by. But I just love this package.
Yeah.
I love the layout. The imagery. I love art that doesn't have a definitive like answer. It more is meant to provoke questions. I mean, whether we're talking music or like visual art. And so in looking at this guy's work, just with all the album covers that he did over the years. He died a few years ago, but it's just striking. You know what I mean? It's something you go, whoa, when you see it. I always feel like that's the sign of a good album cover, is when you look at it, that you have a visceral reaction. And there's not a lot of album covers out there or that have come out really at all over the decades that do that. They're rare. But I felt like the album art was worthy of the music.
Oh yeah, for sure. I just got the vinyl version of it, and
I need to get.
Yeah, because just having it that big in front of you, hell, you could frame it on your wall. It's just except for I'd want to frame like literally every panel, and
because it's not just about the cover. There are so many other, really good looking pieces in that whole layout. And I felt like Francis the Mute was as good, if not better. Like, just those guys sitting in cars with those hoods over their heads.
Yeah, it's really creepy and just very visually striking. Red hoods, a lot of color contrast. It's just it really grabs your eyes.
Totally. So, I can talk forever about on this particular album, but I feel like we should talk about. It's up to you guys how you want to frame this, but Francis the Mute for me was like the most anticipated follow-up record for a really long time.
Oh yeah, like 2 years, something like that. Like it was every minute. I remember because I was actually really excited about Francis the Mute when it came out. It was one of those like counting down the days kind of deals, and when I finally got it in my hands, I was just kind of like, wow, yeah, this delivers. I remember it delivered definitely, from the art for sure, and the lyrics were cool, and just everything about it was cool. I remember being a little angry that like there was so much interlude, but because at that point, I'm still listening to like really straight ahead 2.5 3-minute songs, 10 songs quick succession, and that's just they weren't interested in that. That was not a Mars Volta mindset, at least not until they did the most recent album they did. And I remember Francis the Mute just being like one of those records that for the longest time I would put it on and I would show it to people, and it was one of the first times where people were just like weren't really into it, and I couldn't figure out why. Like I'm looking at them, I was just like, oh no, this is great, and they're just like, Yeah, so like when does the track start? I'm like, dude, just
Didn't I tell you the first time you played this for me in the car? What is this, the new Captain Beefheart?
Yeah, something like that.
Something weird like that.
Yeah, to be honest, I was a little disappointed in Francis the Mute. Again, this is kind of like a lesson for any dudes in bands about the importance of a producer and the producer's job. So my experience in playing in a band and as an artist is that a good producer comes in and he makes, the wackiest stuff and song arrangements and melodies palatable, right? He's supposed to kind of, make the drummer, not be a distraction and hone in your melodies and all the parts to make it function together as a whole. So it's palatable, it's listenable, it's sellable. That's the whole point of the record producer is, that the label pays a bunch of money and hires this producer to help take these artists' vision and make it sellable to the masses, right? And so Francis the Mute, almost in Spinal Tapian
Yeah, right.
is a lesson in a band without a producer, right?
Yeah, because they produced this one themselves, right? I think it was all.
Exactly.
I think it. Yeah.
And the guitarist is the one. Omar is the one that is the band's producer, right? Moving forward.
And get me started on guitarists. Yeah.
So, this is again almost Spinal Tapian cliche because it's like. The guitarist who wants to upstage the lead singer.
You got like literally the two biggest egos that you could possibly have going to war with each other, and that's what Francis the Mute sounds like. And I think initially like one of my biggest things is like I didn't really have anything like it, except for the previous album. So it was one of those I really loved it because it was so crazy. And I think sometimes whenever you anticipate a record coming out for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, it's good no matter what, in your mind, You
want to like it. And I remember having those kinds of feelings as well. Well, they released The Widow before the album dropped. And that's a good song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It sounded like it could have been another track on Deloused, but it was like almost a little bit better. Because it was... that chorus is so palatable. Unfortunately, there's no other moments like that on the whole record.
Right, they do it once. Right, yeah.
There are so many great parts on the album, but it's like... this is a band who, limitless ability and talent and vision, who's just saying, we're just going to write a record that has no choruses because... we feel like it because we just put out this really poppy album. And so now we're going to go the other direction just because we feel like it as a response to, we're not going to do this pop garbage.
Yeah, because we're cool guys.
We're really, really express ourselves. So, and you can hear that, but when they're popping on all cylinders, there are moments on Francis the Mute that are as good as anything on Deloused, almost. Like the moment on the first song, Vismund Cygnus, where they do that ridiculous drop down into the bridge. It's just like, the plane landing.
Right, yeah.
Engines. And then it goes into that really soft, tense, just part with that amazing bass line that just repeats over and over and over. I love that moment. It gives me chills every time I listen to it. But the thing that I loved about Deloused that isn't present on Francis the Mute...
You kind of feel like it's a totally different band?
A little bit. It's just, it doesn't punch. Like, there aren't those moments where the dynamics are emphasized and the chorus comes in where you come out and into a part, and it hits you, emotionally as well as in a rocking kind of way. there's those emotional moments here and there on Francis the Mute, but it lacks that punch where, a part kicks in unexpectedly, or a chorus just kind of comes out of nowhere.
I think that's a product of having nobody to rein them in.
Yeah, exactly. That gets back to my original point.
Right. Yeah. There's, if they had somebody that could just give them a little bit of structure, it's not like they need a lot, but they just need a little bit of direction. And I think this could have been, an amazing sophomore effort. Instead we get something where there's, excellent moments. Like there's parts of, what is the third one, is La Via, La Vescas or something like that. And there's like 4 or 5 minutes of that song that I love. But I'm like, well, there's other parts that I'm just like, I'm lost because I don't know where to go next. And I just think they needed somebody to rein them in. I think they challenged. I mean, I know they wanted to challenge themselves. They wanted to be able to also, have some sort, all the creative control and then challenge their listeners. But I didn't win. They beat me. I had a hard time following on parts of this one, and it kind of creates a theme on the next couple albums after as well, that they're a little bit all over the map. And
yeah, they kind of lost me for the most part after that, at least for a while.
Yeah, they did. I'm right there with you. They did the exact same thing with me. I just was wondering, what happened. There was I don't know if it was ego, substance abuse, because I know they had a lot of problems with that there in the middle, because I know they lost. People passed away because of their substance abuse issues that were in the band, and I think that's kind of what, in the long run, I think that was unfortunately, it took somebody losing their life to that they were close to the rest of them to open their eyes. It sounds like, from what they've said in interviews, but we can get to that one when we get down to it, down to the further albums. But yeah, this one was good. It just it was a little too far. A little too much over the map, unfortunately.
Yeah, and again, getting into lessons, rock and roll 101, things that every band needs to embrace. The lesson here is no matter how great you are at what you do, you always need a producer. You always need someone to come in and make your vision consumable. Otherwise, you get, 15-minute jam sessions that don't necessarily go anywhere. The reason why it kind of still worked for them is because they were that good.
Right. Yeah.
But I heard a lot of comparisons around that time when they would do media and press between them and Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing that Led Zeppelin always had is that no matter how much they would jam, it's still, it was still commercial. The songs were still commercial, and the live show would be this experimental thing.
Right. People love that.
Still sing along-able. You know what I mean? And
right.
That was the thing that they sort of abandoned, except for The Widow. On that second album, not a total disappointment, but definitely somewhat compared to Deloused, which was a career-defining album. It was an album of a generation, I think, as far as like rock music goes.
Well, yeah, and it still sounds new. I mean, 14 years later, 13 years later?
Yeah, that was 2003.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it could drop now, and I think still have the same, probably not the same sales, but at least the same impact.
But people don't buy music anymore.
No, we stream music. Like that's
I was just sitting here biting my fist, trying really hard not to laugh, because my only question I could think of, Andrew, was, did you feel the same way about a producer while you were recording Truthless Heroes?
Oh, man.
Wow, Joe. Way to just ask that question.
I found it to be an interesting point based on what was in the book.
Our relationship with Truthless Heroes and producers was interesting, because we were originally supposed to work with Garth, who did our second record, Drawing Black Lines, but due to some label politics, that we found out about after the fact. Basically, our A&R guy had put us in the studio with him to write some songs following Drawing Black Lines to try to sort of stimulate a relaunch of that album and get Atlantic a little bit more behind it. Put us in the studio with him to write some songs for a film soundtrack. And then because we didn't write a huge radio hit during that session, although we did write Spy Hunter, he never paid him for the recording.
Awesome.
So he kind of jacked over the producer. So we were taking meetings going into producer meetings going into Truthless Heroes, and in our brain we were recording with Garth again because that was good chemistry there. And our plan, he and us, was to work together on that album and record it at Sound City in Van Nuys, which is where so many famous records were made. I don't know if you guys have seen that film Sound City. Have you?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
Half the guys that are in that film, like Nick Raskulinecz, like he was involved with Truthless Heroes. So
wow.
He did some of the demos for us on that album, and he was set up to engineer. Well, let me back up. So originally we were supposed to do it with Garth at Sound City, and then our A&R guy kind of dishonestly steered us away from working with Garth, knowing in the back of his mind that we were not going to hire him because he never paid him for that recording.
Right.
Then we were scheduled to work with Dave Sardi, who had done a bunch of albums that we had loved around that time. And
right.
He did Marilyn Manson and, tons of records that we just really liked and that sounded cool. So we were scheduled to work with him, and then our A&R guy fired him because he didn't get along with his manager. And so our third choice was just kind of an passing suggestion. Hey, why don't we do it with this guy, Matt Hyde, who was recording Slayer or somebody at the time. And we met with him in the studio and really hit it off with him. We got along with him really well, showed him demos, and he really dug the music. And it's like, had a lot of input and ideas on how to, approach songs, etc. So we ended up working with him, and Nick Raskulinecz was supposed to be the engineer because he had done some of our demos. And this other guy who ended up being a really successful pop producer, this guy named Mike Busby, did some of our other demos. So all these like big name people associated with that record. So at any rate, we were in our recording. We had a little space that the label paid for that we built a studio as, but basically a rehearsal space. But it was nice. We had air conditioning and fridge and TV and the whole setup. We were at our space doing pre-production for Truthless Heroes with Matt and Nick, and Nick got a call from Dave Grohl, who said, hey, do you want to produce our new record, Foo Fighters?
You got to say yes. I mean, yeah.
He's right in front of me. And he's like, man, let me get back to you. I'm committed to this other project. And so he gets off the phone, and Nick says, oh, Dave says hi, by the way.
Nice.
And he's like, look, guys, I'm not going to do it if you don't say it's cool.
Right.
I already committed to do your record. I'm not going to just bail on you because I got, a cooler opportunity or whatever. And we all looked at him and said, you got to do it, dude.
Right.
You have to do that record. And that ended up winning a Grammy. And that was One by One.
Okay. Wow.
Record. But he would come into the studio while we were working on Truthless Heroes and show us like rough mixes of songs. So we actually heard that whole album well before it was even mixed.
Oh, very cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But getting back to your original question, what do you mean?
Oh.
Well, I guess
producer in terms of Truthless Heroes, like that's an unpalatable record, or it needed to be reined in?
I meant that based on the writing in your book, you seemed a little dissatisfied with the way he was trying to steer your vocals.
It wasn't really just the vocals. It was the entire process was overwrought, overthought, and not fun. Because we had sold enough records, we'd sold a good amount of records on Drawing Black Lines, which is a record we made in a really short amount of time. We all knew what kind of record we wanted to write, and we were excited. We were all on the same page. So we did it fast, and we had fun doing it. I'm actually writing an entry in it as we speak, not literally as we speak, but before I hopped on the podcast, I was working on an entry for our Pledge Music campaign, just telling some stories about making Drawing Black Lines as a part of kind of like an extended journal I'm doing.
Very cool.
That's
for
awesome.
the people who've been a part of that. If you want to check it out, pledgemusic.com/project86.
Sweet, yeah.
Anyway, we just made this record that was really fun, and it was a really good record the way it came out, and connected with people really well. It was a good record, and so we had a lot of hype going into our third record. And anytime you have some momentum, all these people come out of the woodwork who want to be involved and be in control and take a slice of the pie and all that stuff. So, we went from being on just an indie label, Tooth and Nail, and really not getting much attention over this because their whole staff was basically hipster type people who weren't interested in the kind of music that we were making, which was fine because we weren't making music for hipsters. But went from that to Drawing Black Lines getting picked up by a major and them licensing it, and then on Truthless Heroes being just on Atlantic. And so once they got involved with the process, our management, our A&R, like everybody was speaking into the process, and like we had to write for 18 months, and all they cared about was radio singles, and it was like, hand us melodic songs that are radio friendly, or we're not going to put out your record, or we're not going to buy you out of your contract. Or so there's a lot of pressure, and it was a lot of pressure to write a different kind of music, a different style of music. We were supposed to be writing this commercial rock record, and really my heart was with doing something heavier. Like I wanted to go as heavier than Drawing Black Lines, but no one in our camp wanted to do that.
Right.
The band, the management, the A&R, it was like this band that I had started was being sort of pulled away. So I'm giving you guys kind of a long-winded answer here, but it sort of ties in. So Rock 101, right? We're talking about that. Truthless Heroes was a victim of the opposite, overproduction. Overproduction being overthought, and my sort of response to that within the process was trying to create something I could artistically and creatively control and get into and put my passion into by trying to do this whole like Truthless Heroes thing,
right?
Which is a conceptual element to the record. Not unlike the Mars Volta, because all of their records were conceptual as well. But it became a not seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing, where it was like everything was so overthought. And for me, like I had retreated into this sort of pseudo world of Truthless Heroes and that whole thing, that I lost sight of just writing songs that people connected with, and songs that were just fun, heavy songs that people could yell along with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Even within that, like I know I did. I lost sight of those bigger picture things, and we didn't even put Spy Hunter on that record. Like we recorded Spy Hunter for Truthless Heroes and cut it from the album because it didn't fit into the theme, or it wasn't one of these newer, more radio-friendly songs. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you what, I actually have that song cut. I've got Spy Hunter cut, so whenever I listen to it on like my computer, I listen to it on my phone. Spy Hunter opens that record, and it totally changes the vibe.
That is really interesting that you say that, because you gotta have some regrets, right? Or things that you would do over.
Sure.
My biggest career question or regret, or what was he thinking thing when looking back at myself, 2001, 2002 self, is why didn't you put Spy Hunter on the record, and what would have happened if we would have led with that? Just put that song first. And so if Truthless Heroes opened with the Spy Hunter, track 2 was Hollow Again.
Oh yeah, okay.
Or even track 3 was Hollow Again. And then we just loaded the front of the album with the best songs instead of spreading them out like in this conceptual stupidity. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like Spy Hunter, S.M.C, and then Hollow Again, Your Heroes Are Dead, and then another Boredom Movement, and then Last Meal. Boom! That's a good record.
Right, yeah, cut, we're done. Yep.
And the answers were all there in front of us. We just needed to move the pieces around a little bit, and the whole story behind that record would have been totally different. The fans would have loved it because Spy Hunter was a hit song to our fans. We would have sold more records when the album dropped, and then Atlantic would have probably gotten behind it more, and it probably would have outsold Drawing Black Lines. But because we couldn't see the forest for the trees because of overthinking, overproduction, putting it back into the context of our Mars Volta discussion, it's like you can overproduce a record, and you can underproduce a record. The underproduction is like when you've got just the artists, jamming for 15 minutes. The overproduction is when everything is overthought, the life is squeezed out of it, the mix, the noise, the sounds, the arrangements, the melodies, everything is just, there's no life in it. You know what I mean? And I feel like Drawing Black Lines is in the middle, and that's why that record did well. Not meaning to steer all this to project, but you guys asked.
Oh, don't worry, we will. Don't worry, we will before we get you off the line. But
you may have actually just answered my next question because you brought it up on Deloused and Francis the Mute that the album covers, you like the fact that they make you ask questions and they don't explain anything.
Yeah.
That style of art, and I know you do graphic design. I consider you an expert in this field. Therefore, I feel as though you can answer this question. How do you tell the difference between art for art's sake and art that actually has depth, that doesn't answer anything?
Rephrase that again. Art for...
How do you tell the difference between being artistic for art's sake or actually being artistic? If I were to cut a bunch of things out of a newspaper and throw them on the table and say, I'm not going to tell you what it means, I'm just throwing random stuff at the ground and somebody will find meaning in it, versus here's an actual piece that forces you to ask questions and then I just don't explain it.
I don't know. It's just that reaction, and it's not necessarily something you can explain. It's just something that strikes a chord with you and with people. You know what I mean? Like, you could show anyone that cover, or really any of Storm Thorgerson's album covers, and they're going to have a reaction to it.
Right.
And they don't necessarily give answers. It's just more of a feeling and just like, what does that mean? What is that? What is that trying to say? I love that.
I feel the same way about all the classic Blue Note jazz records, just the way those pictures were shot and the way the colors were strange.
Yeah.
I can't really tell you why they put me in a good mood to listen to jazz, but it's like, okay, now I'm listening to jazz. Yeah. And my brother just laughed at me for mentioning jazz on an episode about Mars Volta.
Hey, you know what? It's not that far off base.
I think no matter what the art form is, it's important that it evokes an emotion. So if that's what makes you happy, then go with it.
Yeah, I like art in general that meets me where I'm at the time, right? So if I'm going through some sort of frustration, seeing something or hearing something that the artist is communicating a similar parallel experience in the human condition, makes you feel like you're not alone in the universe. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the power of music. That's the power of art in general, is to validate what you're experiencing and knowing that somebody else has gone through something similar, and that person is also talented, and put that in the form of art that sounds cool or looks cool, and gets an emotional reaction out of you.
So like a form of commiseration.
Yeah, man.
Cool. So have you listened to much of anything on the third album, which I guess I should make an attempt to
Amputexture?
Amputexture.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amputexture mostly is unlistenable except for Viscera Eyes, which is an amazing song. It has such a cool riff, and just the way that the horns mix and it sort of makes sense. Like, that was one thing that they did at times, is they would use horns and it still sounded like a rock band, not like a, I don't know, ska band or something,
Right.
We actually recently did a discography on Swallow the Sun. They use horns and unusual stringed instruments, and they're like a doom metal band. But
what a great band name, by the way. They're one of my top 10 favorite band names is Swallow the Sun.
Really?
Well, you know why we did it was because of the eclipse. We recorded it.
Because we're right at where we're located at. We're a little south of St. Louis, so we were right in the path of totality for a couple of minutes. So
Which
just
is cool.
Oh, it was wild. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. The coolest thing I think is I think they call it shadow snakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's right before and right after the eclipse, total eclipse happens. You see like these crazy snake like wave lines across the earth, like, and you can only see them whenever you're right next to the ground. You can't see them up high, and it's the wildest thing that you've ever seen. It almost looks like it literally like sidewinders, the sidewinder snakes, just thousands of them going crazy all at the same time. But it's actually. Oh, it's so cool. Well, we're going to be there's what, is it 2021? I think there's another one that's coming through the U.S.
It's going to be in a minute, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's only 4 years off. It's not that far.
All right.
Hopefully I'm alive still. I think I will be.
You're going to be alive, I'm sure. I expect 3 to 4 more records, so no.
Oh, okay. Gotta finish this one first.
Right, I know.
We are almost done.
We are anticipating. Well, yeah. So, can we all agree collectively in the as the four of us that Amputexture is, I mean,
unlistenable?
It's really not. Yeah, like it was the last Mars Volta album I bought, and I think I sold it maybe like a month later. That was after like probably 50 or 60 purchase justification listens, and then I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Because like it was one of those things that I really thought too that it was some kind of really high level concept that just I didn't get. Like I just wasn't smart enough to to really understand it. But music being emotional, kind of an emotional thing for me. It really, if I'm not getting an emotional connection out of it, it really doesn't matter how great it is or how technically played it is. If I don't feel it, I just don't feel it. And on that record, I just really didn't feel anything.
Yeah, and they really lost my attention at that point. Besides Viscera Eyes, which is a great song.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the shame, is that it's so deep in the tracks that if you're somebody like me, I listen cover to cover. That's my listening style. I mean, I was lost by the time I already got there. So I was just like, okay. I mean, and I couldn't even if it is a good song, I don't remember it because it was difficult to get to that point. And I think I've listened to this album in the single digits. I don't even think I'm in double digits on this album. And just because I tried and gave up pretty quickly. I was like, yeah, this is just way all. It's too much over the place. I'm like, and the first thought that came into my head was like, how high were these guys when they were making this music? That was the first thing, and I was like, I'm like, maybe, I don't. That's not my kind of scene. But maybe if I ask somebody, that likes to, trip or something while they're listening to the music, they totally get the album, because it's like it makes no sense to me at all. But I don't know anybody that I've talked to got this album. Maybe like you said, like a track or two that people enjoyed, but as a collective whole, this album is just so far out in left field. It's just, you can't follow it.
Yeah, and that's all that really needs to be said.
I think that the majority of people that
Moving
listen to
on
Mars Volta are going to say, don't listen to that record. Listen to the Bedlam and Goliath.
Yeah, it's better. I mean, there's still a little bit of... It's still out there, but they're not quite as far out there as they were on the previous release. But yeah, the Bedlam and Goliath. I think Goliath is maybe my favorite song on here, but it's still plenty weird. The vocals are really strange on this one.
Yeah, he did a lot of lower vocals on that record, and it just... The thing that makes his voice cool is the fact that he sings so high.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, same for this one.
I got nothing. I mean, because I knew like we were going to spend a lot of time on the first two records, and then it was just going to be like skip.
Maybe I've listened to this one more than anybody else. What is it, Ilyena? That's another one. I really like that song actually, but I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm the only one that likes this album.
See, I feel like on the last record they just embraced the idea of we're no longer a progressive rock band, we're a soundscape artist. Because it's all about like we're just going to create sounds, and it's like, guys, Deloused was really good.
Yeah, but everything was kind of a death rattle after that. Bedlam, Octahedron, Nocturnicate, like there were moments, you know what I mean? And I think Teflon is one of their coolest songs.
Oh yeah.
It's totally cool in a different way. It's like, man, if you guys would just do that, if you're not going to be all crazy prog anymore and you're going to be more stripped back, just write songs like this. And that was the thing that made the Mars Volta so interesting and compelling to me, is that they would give you these little tastes of what they could have done. They gave you a whole record of just awesome from front to back, and then tastes from that point on. But it was like they were kind of just messing with you after everything after Deloused, where it was like, yeah, we could do this if we wanted to, but we don't.
But we already have your $10 or $12, so
and how much it makes you stop and think and go, how much of that is Rick Rubin? On
the first one,
yeah.
It had a lot to do with Rick Rubin honing them in and producing them, and that's why that record was what it was. The rest of these albums, self-produced, and that's what you get. You know what I mean? But it's another Rock 101 lesson in ego, because that's why you don't have a producer, because you don't want anyone telling you how it's going to be. You don't want anyone controlling your art. And I think that's the lesson with the Mars Volta, is like, no matter how great you are, you still need help. You still need someone to come in who's an objective third party who will take your vision and make it palatable and make it better, for people to relate to. And I think that that's the lesson of this band. But they'll always be remembered as, if for no other reason, the little hints of genius, throughout a lot of chaos and weird. And that first album, that first album was one of the best albums ever made.
Sure, yeah.
It's rock music, especially in like the modern era, not the classic era.
There are no really good modern, not that many good modern rock. It just seems to me like ever since like the early 90s, everything is kind of just a version of that, is kind of what I've seen. The
90s were definitely the last kind of great golden era of rock music. My opinion, almost all of the 90s, but it's been a slow, gradual descent since then, and now it's death.
Absolutely.
We had that little resurgence there for a while with Wolfmother and, to some people, the White Stripes, but that was more leading into the noise and indie rock sound than it was about necessarily being great rock music.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of recapturing out there that people try to do.
That's the word.
We want to recapture an era of rock music, and that's not really the same thing as being like a new rock band.
Exactly. Gentlemen, I need to wrap.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being on.
Yeah, man. I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks for having me.
For sure.
Great to chat with you guys and nerd out a little bit about one of my favorite bands. I could probably do another hour and talk about different lessons, life lessons, rock and roll lessons to be gleaned from the Mars Volta, but we got a good overview of their career, primarily focused on their early career.
Yeah, the best part of
That's
their
how
career.
us music elitists like it. So
Thanks for coming on. We
yeah,
appreciate it very much.
Thanks so much, man. We appreciate it.
Door is always open anytime.
Keep supporting my art.
Oh, we will.
We will.
Oh, we will. We have and we will. So have a good night, man.
Great chatting with you.
This has been episode 28 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks. You can find Andrew Schwab and everything Project 86 at project86.com and andrewschwab.com. Huge thank you goes out to Andrew Schwab for hanging out with us and talking about the Mars Volta. We had a blast, and we will see you in the future, no matter how many times we catch you plotting murder.